You've probably seen it before, right? You look at a friend, or maybe even at your own life, and you just can't understand why someone stays in a relationship that is so clearly causing them pain. From the outside, it seems baffling. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that. We're going to explore the invisible architecture that can hold a person in place, long after any real love has disappeared.
It really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why do we, as human beings, sometimes cling so tightly to things that hurt us? And let me be clear, this has nothing to do with being weak or not being smart enough. The answer is so much deeper. It's a really powerful psychological dynamic that's running the show, way beneath the surface of our day-to-day choices.
So to get started, let's look at the very first layer of this invisible structure. It's a phenomenon called a trauma bond. And, this isn't love, it's not just loyalty, it's something else entirely.
So what even is a trauma bond? Essentially, it's this incredibly strong, super confusing emotional connection that forms because of a cycle of abuse. And that's the key thing to get. The bond doesn't happen in spite of the bad moments. It's actually forged because of the chaotic pattern of good and bad.
Now, a bond like this doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's actually built on two very specific key ingredients. First, you need a power imbalance, where one person pretty consistently has the upper hand or control over the other. And second, you need something called intermittent reinforcement. And let me tell you, this is the engine that drives the whole thing. That intermittent reinforcement is everything. See, the abuse is never constant, 24/7 cruelty. It's broken up by these moments of kindness or apologies, or what feels like real affection. That unpredictability, the not knowing when the good version of them will show up again, creates this intense, almost addiction-like attachment. It's actually way more powerful than if the cruelty was just nonstop.
Okay, but the trauma bond? That's just the first layer. Holding it all in place, deep underneath, is this incredibly heavy emotion that most people can't even name. It's the weight of toxic shame.
To really get this, we have to draw a super clear line in the sand. There's healthy shame, and then there's toxic shame. Healthy shame is, well, it's useful. You mess up, you feel bad about it, maybe you apologize, and then the feeling goes away. It's about your actions. Toxic shame, though, that's a whole different animal. It's not a temporary feeling. It's a deep-seated belief about who you are at your core. It doesn't say, I did something bad. It says, I am bad.
This is what that voice sounds like in your head. It's this subtle but devastating shift from doing something wrong to believing you are something wrong. It twists every single action into this damning verdict on your fundamental worth. It's what makes you feel on some level like you actually deserve the bad treatment you're getting. And after a while, it just becomes who you think you are. And you can see how this makes leaving feel impossible, right? If you're convinced that you are the problem, then just going to a new place isn't going to fix anything.
And here's the kicker. You cannot logic your way out of toxic shame. It doesn't matter how many times your friends tell you you're not a failure, it just doesn't sink in. Why? Because that shame wasn't installed with logic or information. It was installed through emotional experiences, often way back in childhood, when a child's brain takes a caregiver's hurtful behavior and internalizes it as proof that they, the child, are somehow defective.
All right, so now we're getting down to the very foundation of this whole invisible architecture. If toxic shame is the cement holding the bricks together, this next concept is the actual blueprint. To deal with things that are completely overwhelming, the brain pulls off a strategy that is absolutely brilliant, not broken. To manage what feels totally unmanageable, the psyche literally compartmentalizes. It splits. And this is not a sign of weakness. It's an incredible, sophisticated adaptation. The researcher Dr. Janina Fisher calls it structural dissociation. It's where different parts of you are created to handle different and often conflicting realities.
So in this model, think of the self as being split into at least two kinds of parts. First, you've got the going on with normal life part. This is the part of you that goes to work, pays the bills, raises the kids. It tries to keep up appearances and pretend everything is okay. But then you've got the trauma-related parts. And these parts hold all the raw survival stuff, the fight, the flight, the absolute terror. And they don't just hang out. They emerge when something in the present moment triggers that old familiar feeling of danger. And this right here explains so much of that initial confusion we talked about. Why does a person say they want to leave, but then they don't? It's not because they're crazy. It's because you're seeing different parts in action.
The going on with normal life part desperately wants out, but then a triggered, trauma-related part suddenly takes the driver's seat, with a survival response like submit or freeze, because that's what kept them safe years ago.
So, if this structure is built so deep inside us, how on earth does anyone start to find a way out? Well, the path to healing isn't really an intellectual one. You can't just read a book and be fixed. It's relational.
This quote from the trauma therapist Katerina O'Mara just nails it. The wounds were often created in relationships, so they have to be healed in relationships. And that doesn't just mean romantic ones. It means any safe connection with a therapist, a friend, a support group, where a person can finally be seen for who they are without being judged as defective.
So the path forward is really about learning some new skills. The first is just learning to notice your own body's signals. You know, that sudden tightness in your chest, or that urge to make yourself small. It's about seeing those as information, not as a command. The second is learning to tell the difference between the past and the present. To be able to pause and ask, is this feeling actually about right now, or is this about back then? And finally, the most important piece of all, experiencing what genuine relational safety feels like. That is the true antidote to the profound isolation of toxic shame.
So after going through all these layers, what is the one big thing we should all take away from this? It's really about completely reframing how we look at this entire struggle.
At the end of the day, the trauma bond, the toxic shame, the split-off parts of the self, none of these things are signs that a person is broken or defective. Not at all. They are the artifacts left behind by a mind that did whatever it had to do to survive a situation that felt unbearable. It is a story of incredible resilience.
And that leaves us with one last question to think about. If all of this complex, painful, invisible architecture was built just to survive, what does it truly look and feel like to finally be safe enough to let it all go?